right, so we're back looking at Gravit, still looking at our tools, and today we're going to go ahead and talk about the shape tools real quick. You'll notice I've got my page already open in Gravit, so this is where we did our line practice. I'm going to go ahead and create a new page, duplicates what I've got, and I'm going to call this page my shape tools, because we're going to look at the shape tools today. So when we did lines, we were able to build a basic triangle just using the lines and joining them together. But while that works, it's not always the best or the easiest way to actually put them together. So let's look at our shape tools. So up here on our menu bar where we had our line tool, on our drop down, we have the rest of the shape tools. And so there are 5 shape tools we're going to look at real quick. First one is, quite frankly, the most basic, the rectangle tool. Drag, click and drag, we have a rectangle. Now, some of these pieces of information are going to be the same for all the different shape tools. So let's real quick look at those sort of common elements. As always, up here at the very top of your options gives you all of your positioning information, things that you can do to move your object around, change its size, change its shape, align it to different size, if I want it left, right, middle. Those are our tools for adjusting the actual shape and transforming it physically. So size, shape, rotation, things like that. Below it is where we start to get into the basics of what does our shape actually look like. So the first slider is the corner slider, and you'll notice on my screen it changes the corners. Are they perfectly sharp at 90 degrees, or as you move this farther and farther to the right, have they curved off point to point? And the computer automatically does the math, so you get nice smooth curves, so you don't have to do it by hand. Okay? Now, below that is opacity, which again is how see-through something is, and that can be affected to any kind of shape that you build. Blending mode has to do with when you stack multiple shapes on top of it, and we'll get into this a lot more when we start talking about layering. Okay? But generally, normal is all you're going to leave it at. Shared styles have to do with Gravit Pro. Ignore them. They don't matter for us today. So our fills, the default fill is a sort of light gray, but I can change that to anything I want. Now, how did I get green so fast? Well, there are 2 ways to change fills. The first is to actually touch the actual color circle there, and it brings up a color picker chart. And I can sort of scroll however I want. Maybe I want a purple color. And then I want one that is a little more transparent, so go for that. Or maybe I just click around in here and say, well, that's the color I want. Great, that's it. The other option is down here just to the sort of lower right-hand corner, there's what looks like a little eyedropper, a choose a color. If I click on this and I come out to my canvas and I say, well, over here we have this green that I just want to duplicate, so I can just click and go. Maybe I want the red border as my fill. So, hey, there it is. You'll notice the outside circle of my option here changes color to match what it is I'm picking. So again, it's just a different way to pick colors. I can make it white by clicking the background. I'm going to go back. I'm going to fill it with red. Oops, missed that. Apparently can't keep my mouse straight today. So I filled it with red. Now, when we built a line, it automatically had a border but no fill. But when we build a shape, it automatically has a fill but no border. So the border is basically the pen you drew the shape with. So I can add a border. And again, you can't really see it very easily, so I'm going to blow it up, say to 15 points, and suddenly you can see that outer border there as well. I'm going to make it actually a little bit bigger. Let's make it 30. Makes it a little easier to see, and I'm going to sort of zoom in on my shape. So with our border now, we can make some modifications just like we did before. Now the thing I want to point out is that when we did our line tools, we talked a little bit about these joins, but we couldn't show them because we didn't have anything joined at the time. Line joins or border joins really come into play when you're building with shapes because we actually have a series of paths. So one across the top, one down, one across the bottom, one on the left side. These 4 individual paths that are connected, just like when we connected our paths of our original line tool, and those paths connected define the shape. And because they are actually connected at the edge, we can go ahead and we can change how they join. So a miter, or a square joint, is sort of the normal. It's the default. Our shape comes in at 90 degrees, leaves at 90 degrees. The left one here is the bevel, and that's sort of the cutting off the corner. So if I click on that, well, nothing happened because my shape is not set up for it. Not a big deal. We'll look at that a little bit later. Let's see if I can do rounded join. No, my piece is a little too off. We'll dig into those a little bit later then. I can, again, apply border styles. Now, why isn't it showing up? It has to, again, due to the size of the piece. So you'll have to play with these as you get going. You can't apply start or end arrows because there is no start or end point on here. Now, auto-scaling the borders, this happens to be important. Now, if I take this and I make it bigger, it scales the size of the border with it. So you notice now my border is 62 points, 60.1 points. If I shrink it really, really tiny, it's now down to 4.7 points. So that's something you can think about. If you have that auto scale borders checked, you can change the size of a shape and the proportions between the border and the shape will stay the same. Okay? So other things we want to look at, positioning of our border. The default is inside for this kind of a shape. You can also change it and make it centered. You'll notice when I move it centered, it splits it out enough that we can actually see our dashed line, and I'll bet you that we might be able to see our bevel if I deleted the whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of our dashed line. Now that it's not on the inside, it can actually bevel those corners. Okay. Same thing, if I round the corners, it just rounds off the corners as well. But those were only available once I changed it from positioning the stroke inside the border. So you notice our anchors are on the outside of the edge. Now our anchors are in the dead center. And we can also put our anchors outside. Basically, when they're inside the anchors, it won't let it cut off or maintain those bevels, things like that. So think about that. If you're ever having trouble getting a shape to do the corners that you want, it may simply be that you are currently on the inside edge instead of on the outside. So as we work through all these little options, you can see there's lots of things you can change. And again, you still have all these. But that's the basics that are sort of across all shapes that you can modify. So let's go ahead and look at our other shape tools. Shrink that and move it out of the way. So we have our rectangle. Our next shape tool is the ellipse or circle. So if I drag, I can create a circle. Works great. Now, the problem is I personally have some serious problems making a perfect circle by hand. So we have a few options. Number one, if you hold down the Shift key on your keyboard while you're dragging, it is going to automatically create a perfect circle. And it starts that circle wherever you started to click. So if I click here, hold down Shift, that point I started where I clicked is this anchor right here. Okay? So that's something to think about. But holding down Shift will actually get you a perfect circle. Now, if I hold down the Alt key, instead of it growing from that point, wherever I click becomes the center of my circle. Okay? So in this case, if I click here, well, let me do this way. If I click here normally, so I'm not holding anything down, where I clicked becomes the upper left point. If I click there while holding Alt, it becomes the center. So that's how you can manipulate how those start and grow. Now what's really neat is that you can use those together. So if I need a perfect circle centered right where my mouse is, right now I'm just sort of dragging, but if I hold down Shift, well, there's my perfect circle. If I hold down Alt, it grows from that center. So I can get a perfect circle centered on my point. And that manipulation when you're building shapes also applies to things like the rectangle tool. So holding down Shift gets me a perfect square. Holding down Alt makes it grow right from the center. So those are common ways to create perfect shapes. So on my circles, you'll notice I have all the same appearances. My shapes. Now this is what's really kind of neat about the circle shape, or the ellipse shape, excuse me. It has the ability to create a portion of a circle automatically. So right now it has two angles listed, 180 to 180, and my shape should be open, close, or a pie. So right now it's on pie. So let's change some numbers and let's see what happens. As we increase this, you'll notice that it starts changing. If I start increasing this one, look at that. So what's happening is this. I'm going to go back to my defaults of 180 and 180. So right now from the center out to the left is an invisible line. Okay, it's kind of like from the center out to the left, it's an invisible ray. And what we're saying is this one, the one on the left, moves one of the rays. And if I start reducing it, it's cutting the ray and sort of raising it up and completing the circle around that ray instead. Do the same thing over here. And again, I'm just scrolling my mouse wheel. I can also type all I want. And it's filling in based on those. So you can create a partial circle in any way, depending on how you manipulate those numbers. Now, it starts off with this pie shape, but we can also do closed. So that's like it cuts it off and just connects the circle there. And then open means that it creates this. Now, it didn't seem to change much, right? Well, what if we add a border, say, call it, say, 10 points just so we can see it, and then remove our fill, okay? Oops, wrong button. So I'm going to take this, I'm just going to make that not visible. So now I can just build a perfect arc that matches my values here. So it's another way to manipulate these shapes. Other than that, your opacity, blending, your fills, your borders, they all have the same options as they did when we worked on our rectangles. I'm going to just sort of slide this one up out of the way. And let's look at our next tool. So the next tool in line is the Polygon Tool. So the Polygon Tool is just a fancy way of making a shape with however many sides as you need. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to start drawing, and you'll notice it starts out, it gave me a hexagon. That is the default for the Polygon Tool. Now, come over here. I've got all my same positional, but now under appearance, this is where we can really modify it. Where the ellipse had the ability to change it from a solid circle into a sort of a Pac-Man shape, a pie shape, or an arc. With this, we actually get to change the number of points. So from 6, maybe I need an octagon, change it to 8. Now it's got 8 sides. Well, maybe I need 12, or maybe I just need, say, 3. Well, hey, there's my triangle. Also, 4, well, there's a square or a rectangle. So this is another way to create those shapes if you need a little more fine control over how they're built. Now your corners, just like before, you can round them off, and that works whether it's 4 here, or maybe we turn this up to 7. It's going to round those corners off. If you round them off all the way, it gets really close to a circle, but not quite. Right? Your other options are again the same. So again, this is just how you can build any number-sided polygon that you need to in Gravit. Slide that out of the way, and let's look at our next one. So our triangle. Well, if you look over here, it's just a Polygon Tool with a default of 3. Okay, you can change it and make it whatever you want, but again, it's just a default of 3 for the Polygon Tool. Is all it is. Okay? Other than that, no difference between it and the Polygon Tool. Slide that out of the way. Okay. The last one we have is the Star Tool. And the Star Tool is a little bit different. So again, bring it out, drag. If I hold down Shift, it does it from the center. Alt does it from the center. Okay. So I've got this star shape. Now, over here under my appearance, I have a lot more options. Number one, I can change the number of points. So how many points do you need on your star? So maybe you are, again, drop down to 3, you get a triangle, but start increasing it. And there we go. We had to adjust that because it automatically adjusted that for me. So I can get maybe, a big starburst, something like that. Now the size changes the length that the rays are from the outer points to the inner points. So you can manipulate that. Your corners, again, are they soft, are they rounded, or are they sharp? Okay. So your Star Tool lets you actually build different shapes with these different points, rather than just having the number of sides. It actually builds that number of points. And just like the others, we can go ahead and change its fill color. We can go ahead and add a border if we wanted to. So maybe we want that much of a border, and we want it to be a little bigger, maybe fewer points. So there's lots of things you can do to manipulate these shape tools. But these tools up here are really sort of the core pieces for building basic shapes that you're going to use to put back and forth across your designs. So that's the basics of the shape tools. And so we'll have some time to practice these and sort of see how they interact with each other before we move